Hi, Christina.
Hi there.
How are you?
I am well. How about you?
Good, thank you. It's nice to talk to you again.
It is, and it is also sad to say that it is about the end of Lucifer.
I know. Strange times.
So has the end finally really sunk in now? I mean, with the show finished filming and now doing this last round of press to talk about the last season, does it feel like the last season is done?
Um, it doesn't yet. I think, like knowing that like the show's got a drop and talking about the show still, it doesn't feel like I've been able to truly just like let it go yet. But it's going to be kind of a very interesting day when on September the 10th when the show drops, because that's kind of it. And I think it will slowly start to sink in then. I mean, it feels like still I'm in New York working at the moment, but I've still had it programmed into me that year after year I'm going to go back to Lucifer and we'll start shooting blah blah blah. And I haven't had that experience yet of going, oh, we're not going back. But I think it's about to happen because I'm about to wrap on this job here, and then I'll be like, what's next? And it's definitely not Lucifer. So yeah. So it's a strange time in my life, but I feel very satisfied about the last 6 years for sure.
Yeah, because it must have been kind of strange. I would imagine you couldn't have had like a big wrap party celebration with, doing the show during COVID.
It was that, I mean, that was really, yeah, that was tough, like not being able to properly celebrate with everybody and say goodbye properly. I still feel like at some point we'll all try and get together and round it off in a suitable Lucifer manner. But yeah, it was really tough shooting during COVID, and certainly shooting the final season during COVID, because I felt like I wasn't ever truly able to express to the people around me how I felt about them. But yeah, hey ho, at least we got to do it. We all felt very grateful that we were working at the time.
When was the point that you actually found out what the official ending of the series would be?
Well, when we were shooting season 5, we thought that was the final season.
Yeah.
And so I sat with Joe and Ildi for a while, and we mused for a long time about what the end of the show should be. And we all kind of agreed on this particular ending. And then, of course, we were thrown a sort of slight curveball at the end, and that Netflix asked us to do another season. But I think that we have managed to preserve like the notion and certainly the end of what we thought the end of the show should be. So I've sort of known loosely how the show was going to end for a while. The thing that was sort of new to me was the storyline of season 6 and how we ended up getting back to where we were planning on ending. But yeah.
Yeah, because I know that, you had gotten that pickup announcement during the season, so things had to shift. So that's why I was curious how much had to then be added.
It was very late in the day. I mean, I remember being in the production office and Joe and Ildi came to say, do you want to hear something funny? And I was like, they've offered us another season. And they were like, uh-huh. And we would, because we'd already kind of like broken the finale. We'd already like talked about what it was, but the writers had gone off to like write it. So it was very, very late in the day. So it was a little bit of a kind of mental rehash for me to sort of get my head around it. But yeah, that feels like quite a long time ago now. There's lots of stuff's happened since then. Yeah. There's been a thing called a global pandemic since then.
Yeah. I absolutely love that part of your first episode back is set inside of the Magic Castle and incorporates magic, because I am such a magic fan myself, and sort of makes sense that Lucifer would be too, since it does have that bit of mischievous and rebellious air about it. How did that come about? Were you a fan of magic? Whose idea was all of that?
Well, we have a writer on our staff called Mike Costa, who is a member of the Magic Castle and a huge, he's into magic. He's proper a magic nerd, we should say. And basically, I think over the years, we'd always, in the writer's room, they talked about, wouldn't it be great if we did an episode here or an episode there? And the Magic Castle was an episode that they've talked about for a while and never been able to facilitate it, within what we've been doing that season. And then when the season 6 opportunity came in, like saying, do you want to do season 6? I think they felt in the writers' room that finally they had this opportunity to do the Magic Castle kind of episode that they wanted to do. So it's been simmering away really in the writers' room of Lucifer for a few years, but I think Mike was absolutely delighted when it finally came up, and you know, being the opening of the season as well was a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun episode.
Oh, it really is. Yeah, it's kind of that episode to me is a little bit like the calm before the storm, because you've had this big kind of like ending to season 5, and then this sort of a month later, not much has really happened, and we've got this sort of period of procrastination that our characters have been going through. And then it kind of like quite a small-ish story, you know, in a small setting and intimate to start the season off. But I think it's just, you know, we needed to give ourselves somewhere to go, so it felt very appropriate.
What was it like to find out about the whole Rory storyline and know that you'd be bringing in time travel and a future daughter? I mean, it's sort of like all of these crazy things. What were you most excited about with exploring with that? What were you most nervous about with putting this in the show in the last season?
I think you know, when I first heard the time travel storyline, I was like, what? But that's not been the first time I've had that kind of reaction to an idea that Joe and Ildy have pitched me. I've been like, how is that going to, but then of course, you know, we've realized that we have the luxury within this show. We have a certain license to kind of go crazy and zany. And as long as we all kind of commit to it, then everyone seems to come with us. And we've taken a few swings over the years, and people have really embraced, you know, the kind of like swings that we've taken. So in this case, there's no reason why that shouldn't happen as well. I guess my one sort of like thing that you say about being nervous about it, introducing a new character in the final season of something where people really love our characters and we're trying to round their stories off, could be seen as a bit of a risk if you want your audience to feel something for that character as well. But at the same time, the character that we're introducing, there is so much feeling for that character from our lead characters, basically, that I think that, you know, we are able by proxy as an audience member to deeply care about this relationship.
What was it like for you guys to bring in Brianna Hildebrand, and how did you and Lauren navigate that dynamic with her?
It was, I mean, Brianna was great. I loved working with her. It was interesting actually. Brianna is a kind of like innately shy person. And sort of like she's sort of she holds her cards close to her chest, and she's a bit of an observer. She's got a wicked sense of humor. And I found myself, like, much like Lucifer, I found myself as Tom trying to kind of like impress myself upon her. I kind of like, and that sort of, that echoed both on and off screen, like I always felt like I was playing catch up with her. I just really, really wanted her to like me. And I felt, that was a kind of similar energy to what Lucifer was going through once he kind of had caved in and realized that this was, their daughter and all of those things. He just wanted her to love him. And I was able to kind of like play that out quite nicely with Brianna, because she is, like I say, this innately shy person. She doesn't give too much away. But by the end of it, I felt so fond of her. And I did feel like her dad. I mean, it's weird how these things happen on our show, but like Dennis felt like my dad when we were shooting season 5. And by the end of season 6, I felt like I was Brianna's dad. And I was really kind of like proud of her about certain things, like her singing voice, for example. I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And I just kept wanting to tell people how wonderful it was. And so on the last day, we ended up doing like a little impromptu gig outside the trailers with my guitar and my amp and a microphone. And I just got her to sing in front of people like a very embarrassing dad. But thankfully she went along with it.
Yeah, I love that you get to do a duet, because it feels like there's no way that anybody can join the show and be part of Lucifer's family if you don't end up singing with him at some point.
Exactly. But also because music is so intrinsic to Lucifer. It's a language to Lucifer. It's something he truly understands. And for his offspring to have inherited that side of things, and so that love of music, and just, honestly, when Brianna sang to me when I heard Brianna singing for the first time, I couldn't believe how beautiful her voice was. It was truly lovely.
What does it mean to him to finally get to that point where she calls him dad?
I mean, it was it was unique in terms of I haven't felt that feeling on the set of Lucifer before, and I think that sort of echoes what I really liked about season 6. Full stop. Is that it was an opportunity to explore a dynamic that we hadn't done before. We felt like we'd touched everywhere else, but Lucifer as a parent was something I'd never sort of fathomed. And one thing I can say as Tom as a parent was I was able to kind of like delve into those feelings, delve into like what that means and how kind of disarming that is. And how you just, like I was saying before, you just want that person, you just want to impress yourself upon that person and be a focal point in that person's life. And it was a territory I didn't think we'd ever explore, but I was so glad we actually got to do it.
How do you feel about the final decision that these characters make in regard to, Amenadiel becoming God, Lucifer essentially becoming Hell's therapist? What did you feel about those final decisions for those characters?
They felt right. Like I felt like the sort of neat and tidy version of Lucifer would be to go, and Lucifer goes from being the devil to being God. But actually, I'm all about the journey, and the point of like Lucifer using his experience on Earth and what he'd learned through all these different things, rather than just going to a place like heaven, he actually needs to take it to a place that really needs it. And realizing that souls can still be saved after they've been damned was a huge kind of like turning point, and Lucifer kind of utilizing what he's learned to essentially go and do what his calling was and run hell his way. I loved that notion. And I also felt like Amenadiel being God just felt so appropriate. And especially since he also had walked with mankind, he also knows what it's like to be a father. And I just feel like his innate kind of wisdom and his innate presence as an angel suggested that he would be a much stronger God than Lucifer would be. Yeah.
One of the most talked about aspects of the show has been whether Ella would ever find out about Lucifer and whether she should find out, how she would react if she found out. So how do you feel about her finding out and her reaction to finding out? Did you feel like that was something that had to happen before the end of the series?
I mean, again, it wasn't something that I ever felt. I didn't ever think we'd get there. But again, when season 6 was thrown in, it was like, well, what haven't we done? Who still needs to find out? What are we going to? And I don't think that Ella needed to find out, because one of the things we've always loved about the Ella character over the years is that she has this faith, and faith is the important part of that whole equation. The not knowing and still committing and believing is the important part of that equation. So for her to be suddenly knowledgeable that these things that she's had her faith in do exist was a little bit like, do we need to be doing that? But at the same time, these people are her friends, and Ella's not she's not stupid. She's a very intelligent person. She's very brilliant at her job. So I kind of feel like to lose that conceit in the final season and give her that kind of, what does this mean to you situation, I think that was actually something that was really important, and something I think, again, it was a story that we hadn't told yet.
As hard as it was to lose Dan to the land of the living last season, I am very glad we got the chance to see him again in this last season. How did you feel about that journey and having him hang around for the season while only some of you could see him and communicate and interact with him?
Oh, poor Dan. I know. Well, obviously, when we killed Dan, we thought that would only be one more episode of Lucifer after that. So it was kind of like, it was a tragic kind of ending, in season 5. So knowing when season 6 came out, we were like, oh my God, but we've killed Dan. What are we going to do? But of course, being the show, we've got this license to really sort of play around with the notion of the afterlife. So having him in purgatory, knowing that Lucifer would do anything he can to save his friend and all of those things, I was personally delighted that we could still have Kevin in the show, because he's just brilliant. But also it made quite a lot of sense for our characters. It also helped in that kind of illustration and explanation to Lucifer that souls can be saved. When he finds out that Dan finally made it to heaven, like, that's a really big moment. And it's a really big moment in subconsciously for Lucifer, realizing what Lucifer's actual calling is. So that whole Dan storyline really helped service that notion at the end that souls can be saved still, and this is how you do it. But also it was great because Kevin ended up directing 2 of our episodes in the final season. And not only is Kevin an amazing performer, he's also turned into a fantastic director. And it was great on all fronts just to have Kevin. I would have Kevin Alejandro on every day, on every set if I could.
Were there any funny moments when he's hanging out on set and only some people can see him and talk to him, and it would make the other characters seem crazy?
We did. I mean, there was always moments of like, can you sit down? Are you able to actually sit on a stool without falling through it? And like all these kind of like rules that we weren't quite sure about, but I think we just sort of committed to what felt right on the day. But it was, the one thing I would say about Kevin is that like, he was quite happy and everyone was a bit jealous that he got to wear exactly the same thing for the entire season.
It seems like the next natural step after doing a musical episode is to do an animated episode. So did you know that was something that Joe Henderson had always wanted to do? Had you talked about before trying to figure out how to do that?
Well, we were, I think Joe and I were sort of just having a sort of general spitballing conversation before the season started, knowing that we had all these COVID restrictions in place. And it was like that came out of the obstacle of COVID. And it was like, how can we cut down on, how can we cut down on our scripts? How can we cut down on like time together physically and all of these things? And then we talked about the fact that the Blacklist had just come out announcing that they were doing a fully animated season. And then we were like, hold on a minute, maybe we could do an animated episode, maybe we could do this. So it sort of started like that. And then Joe was able to go away and think about it and really hone it into how we can actually make that work. But we were very excited when we realized that that's something we could do.
What did you think of seeing yourself in animated form like that? And it did make you want to just do now like some kind of animated series of Lucifer?
We're laughing about that. We actually have thought maybe there is an afterlife for Lucifer here in a sort of animated world, but it was incredibly fun. And when they started sending me the sketches of what Lucifer was going to look like as a cartoon, I just basically, Joe was like, how butt-like do you want your chin to be? And my notes were always the more butt. The more butt, the better, basically, for the chin. I just felt like less is not more in this circumstance.
With this being the last season and the last chance to perform certain songs on the show, was there anything specific that you wanted to make sure to work in before the series was done?
I don't think so. I mean, actually, Lady is a Tramp, which I do with Bob the drag queen, is in episode 2. That is something that for years I've kind of thought, this would be really fun for Lucifer to do, but we just never found the right moment for it to happen. And then lo and behold, there was a scene with that, and I was like, Hildy, can we do this? That version of Lady as a Tramp is something that I'd always wanted to do and wasn't sure we'd ever get around to it. But apart from that, like my bucket list of songs was pretty much ticked off when we did the musical episode last season.
Yeah, so, I love that Lady as a Tramp episode. I mean, that whole musical number in that episode I thought was so great.
It was a lot of fun to do, and Bob was just brilliant. I mean, I'd had this kind of like feeling about this song, and I didn't know how it was going to manifest itself on the show, but to do it as a duet with him, and the way that we did it, and the way that he, brought his humor and unique kind of voice to that version of it, it was so much fun to be part of. And I remember on the day, because it was quite a sort of, filming for the crew was pretty arduous at times during season 6 because of the COVID stuff, because they were always in their masks and their shields, and any opportunity that we had to make them laugh or like give them a thrill was great. And I remember that day that people just really enjoyed the shooting of that scene because it was something a bit different and it made everyone smile. So job done. Yeah.
Well, with Chloe and Lucifer reunited at the end of the season, where do you think their time together, what do you think it looks like now? What is this new version of their partnership going to entail?
Oh, I think, she'll probably help him impart his wisdom upon the lost souls of hell. But I think, they can create whatever they want down in hell. So hell isn't hell as we know it anymore. It's just that what this place is called. It doesn't need to necessarily be hellish. So they can spend their life together. And of course, their daughter is half angel, so she'll be there as well with them whenever she wants to be. And that makes me happy that they get to spend eternity together.
The hardest goodbye for me was the one between Lucifer and Maze, because there's just so much that's not being said between them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they clearly have an emotional bond. What was that scene like to shoot? What was it like to do that? Because I just thought it was so emotionally moving.
I'm getting hair standing up when you're talking about it. It was, episode 9 is probably my favorite episode of season 6, the penultimate episode, because that episode, there are some really genuine moments on the screen. That was my last ever scene with Lesley-Ann. And so I didn't want to think too much about it. I wanted to exist in as much truth as possible. So we hardly rehearsed it. We hardly did anything about it. And I just wanted to treat it as I'm saying goodbye to you. And I'm saying goodbye. And I know I'm saying goodbye, but we're not saying that. And, that for me, those are always the most sort of powerful moments with actors. Watching someone who wants to cry, but they're trying so hard not to, is much more interesting than watching someone just gush. And so, it's fraught with those moments across the whole episode, but particularly with Lesley-Ann in that scene, it just felt, because these are two characters that don't really like talking about their feelings very much. And so, like you say, what wasn't said in that scene really kind of like just sort of simmers under the surface constantly. And it's really impactful. And, it was, the whole episode for me was quite cathartic, because I essentially was saying goodbye to everybody, as Tom and as Lucifer, and like those moments we tried to keep as raw and fresh on the screen as possible.
Along with saying goodbye to the show and the character, you also had to leave Lucifer's Corvette behind. I know you would have taken the car home with you if you could have, but did you ever get to borrow it while you were making the show? Did you get to have a moment to say goodbye to the car?
Never. I had to fight to drive the car in the actual show from time to time, because they were like, we've got a stunt guy for this. I'm like, please let me drive it. It was unfortunately not. I do believe that car will probably be part of the Warner Brothers studio tour when you go and see the sort of the famous vehicles from Warner Brothers shows. Yes, unfortunately not. But I loved that car for so many reasons. But one thing I would say about it is it looks amazing. It is an absolute beast to drive. It's like doing a workout.
Yeah, my father has an old Mustang, so I know how difficult those cars can be to drive. Did you get a moment to say goodbye to the car? Did you have a final moment where you could just, admire the car?
Well, I think, again, in that episode, in episode 9, where we go out to the beach as the family, that was a kind of like big last day in the car, basically. And again, it sort of felt quite appropriate. And also we had the driving lesson with Rory, which was quite sort of, the handing over of the keys was quite a sort of symbolic in that sense. But yeah, no, I will miss that car. It kind of, I remember seeing it on day 1 of shooting or day 2 of shooting, whenever we were down at Hollywood Boulevard in the pilot. And that was kind of, for me, the missing piece. I had the suit, I had everything else, and I thought a lot about this character. And when this car rocked up, I was like, yes, I know exactly who this character is.
Scott Porter also joins the show this season, which, again, can't be an easy thing to do. And he really fits in quite naturally. What did you most enjoy about what he brought and what his character brought to this season?
Well, I'd known Scott. I did my first ever pilot, actually, with Scott back in 2009. So it was lovely to have him in that sense and have an old mate there. But what he brought as the character of Carol was, again, that kind of like someone who wasn't in on it. And it's always quite fun, as a dynamic on the show. Obviously, we're talking about Ella being the last one to find out, but there's still a character who we introduce who's still kind of like clueless that all these people actually exist and are real in the guise that they're claiming. So having someone there who is just a very human, very grounded aspect is always really important in our storytelling. And Scott brought that in abundance. And he's just, he's such a pro. He's just fitted right in. He was great.
What's it been like for you to transition from doing Lucifer to doing your role in Players? I mean, did you notice an adjustment? Because you are doing them closer together than, if you had taken some long break in between?
Yeah, I mean, I had that my first kind of couple of weeks here when we were like having fittings and rehearsals and all that sort of stuff. I was sort of plagued in my head with this notion of like, I've forgotten how to do this. Like, I haven't played a new character for such a long time. I sort of doubting my choices and the way I felt about stuff. So it was, I was sort of worrying myself to start with, but then a couple of days into shooting, I was like, oh yeah, this is how we go. This is how we do it. And it's been really nice in sort of, it's been quite a cathartic process actually to sort of move on and play somebody else, because I'd sort of worried about whether I'd be able to do that again. But no, it's been good, and I'm hoping that Nick, who I play in Players, is quite different to Lucifer. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, what have you enjoyed about the character, about doing sort of a romantic comedy feel? Do you have romantic comedies that, favorite romantic comedies of your own?
Yeah. I mean, rom-com was a genre that I loved growing up. And of course, I grew up during Four Weddings and a Funeral and all like Notting Hill. The Richard Curtis rom-coms were very prevalent in my growing up. But my favorite rom-com, and it's so amazing that we're here in New York, my favorite rom-com is When Harry Met Sally. And I have always loved that movie. And it's really amazing being in New York where all these like iconic rom-coms have happened over the years. Because it is a very much a character in the movie. So I don't know. It's I'm having a really nice time doing something completely different. And I don't know. I feel like 6 years of doing Lucifer, spending so much time on a set in front of cameras and all that sort of stuff. One thing I would say is that I feel less nervous than I used to walking onto a set, and I feel ready to play as opposed to try and get it right, which is quite a liberating feeling, actually.
I love Notting Hill because it always gave me something when family or friends didn't understand what I did for a living. I could always say, well, if you kind of want to know what a press junket is, go watch Notting Hill.
There you go, exactly.
It gave you something to refer people to. Well, have you already started to think about what you want to do after this? Do you have something lined up? Are you reading stuff? Like, are you thinking about that?
I mean, I am. I'm not in a rush. There's been things that have come my way and I've said no thank you to, because I just, it was so consuming for 6 years doing Lucifer that I'm not in a rush to go back and do a long running TV show again. One thing that I think about a lot is that it was a real gift to play one character for 6 years. But one thing I always loved as an actor was playing different people and having that variety. And so I'm not going to rush to sign up to a long running character again, but I'd love to kind of do limited series and films and theatre and just kind of keep just playing different people, because that's what I really love about this job.
Is there a genre that you haven't worked in yet that you have like a secret desire to do?
Well, I mean, Lucifer sort of made me fall in love with singing again. And before doing this job, I don't think I would ever really thought about doing a musical, for example. But that is something that I would love to do in my future, for sure. And I wouldn't have been saying that to you 6 years ago. So there you go. That's probably answers that question. I feel like I'm ready for a musical.
Would you want to do a musical that we're familiar with? Would you want to do an original musical?
I'd be open to both. But yeah, I mean, it's always, for me, it's always about the material. So if I respond to the material, then I'll want to do it. So we shall see.
Well, what do you think you'll miss most about the show, the cast, this character? What do you think will be the hardest thing once it finally fully sinks in to have said goodbye to?
Obviously, the friends that I made and the feeling that we had making the show was really special. But I think just in terms of an actor and as a job, what I'm really going to miss is just every day on Lucifer, I felt like I had the opportunity to do something different, to kind of flex a different side of my skill set, because it was just such a multifaceted character within a show that was like action, comedy, serious dramatic beats, music. It had everything. So I don't think I'm going to have so much variety in one character again, and I'm really going to miss that.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I always loved about the show is that it's sort of every genre in one. There's all these things going on. It's very unexpected in that way. I never really knew where the next season was going to take things, and that's fun. I mean, you don't want to,
It's the Dick Van Dyke of TV shows. That's what I call it. A bit of everything.
It's fun because it's not like, with the sitcom, you expect it to sort of be the same every week. You expect the characters to be the same and that the laughs kind of have the same beats. And with a show like this, I think the total unexpected was really part of its charm.
Oh, absolutely. Because I think people expected it to be exactly what you're saying, with that procedural element to it. And it's that, it's that show where this is the dynamic amongst our characters. This is what we solved this week. And when we come back next week, it'll be a new thing to solve. Now, that would have been the boring version of Lucifer. But actually what we found was, these are the jobs that they do, and each week we'll do this, but that was just a way to plot how we then, outside of that, look at these characters' lives and what's happening to them and what they mean to each other. And it had this kind of constant journey and this constant evolving narrative, and that was just that was my favorite part of the show. Well, I appreciate you talking to me about it again. It was fun to watch this last season because it is sort of wild. I had absolutely no idea the story points that were coming, so I thought it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Thank you so much, Christina, and thanks for all your support over the years as well. Thank you. It's been delightful to talk to you about the show. So thank you so much.